Today is all about ideas, and it's about having ideas that will actually turn into something commercial for you, of commercial benefit. Ideas are important. I just want to say a bit about a programme that I have. It's a coaching programme. It's 12 weeks of taking your ideas and making them into reality. So I'm passionate about ideas. Ideas are so important. They are actually the competitive currency. When you think about it, your ideas are the things that make you different from everybody else. When you think about it, your ideas are the things that make your business different from anybody else's business. Does anybody remember those blackberries? Well, if you think about it, it's the ideas that the people at Research in Motion or BlackBerry had that led to the success or not of that company. It's the ideas that the people at Apple had that led to the success of the company. And actually, they came out, didn't they, a couple of years ago and said, you know, the growth is going to slow. And why is the growth going to slow? Because they seem to be running out of ideas a little bit. So ideas are really important. But have you ever had a time where you thought, actually, you know, I really need some good ideas and I can't think of anything right now? I don't know what to do with this. Yeah, no, some people do, some people don't. Have you ever had so many great ideas that you thinking, I want to implement all of these, and actually having the time to get them off the ground and work out which one is best? We need ideas to get our big, hairy, audacious goals, our BHAGs, off the ground, okay? A BHAG is a strategy term, and the companies that are most successful have big, hairy, audacious goals that are really clearly stated. So some of the ones I like are land a man on the moon by the end of this decade and return him safely to Earth, which connects really nicely to the person sweeping the floor, knowing that they were helping put people into space. These big, hairy, audacious goals go all the way through the business. I like Twitter's, which is to become the pulse of the planet. I like Google's, which is to take all the information around the world and make it universally accessible and usable and useful. Big, hairy, audacious goals are also known as moonshots. You might have heard that expression, which is if you shoot for the moon, you might at least land among the stars and you'll get further than you would have done otherwise. And how are you going to get there? How are you going to even make progress towards doing something big and audacious? Well, it's through ideas. If you want your company to have a really distinctive, unique selling point, if you want to have competitive differentiation, that means that you can get away from the space where it's all commoditized and out into what we call the blue ocean. The blue ocean being a metaphor for that lovely space in business where actually you can more or less dominate, you can charge more. It's a long way for people to catch up with you. If you want to compete in just doing what everybody else is doing, all that happens is it's predatory. That's where the term red ocean comes from, because actually what's happening is that it's quite a bloody environment. That's the metaphor. And because it's predatory, and because people are doing similar things, all that happens is that price gets driven down, margin gets driven down, and quality gets driven down, and competitors fall out of the market. Whereas if you have got great ideas that can take you somewhere else, that can take you somewhere different, that can separate you from that, you can make more money, be sustainable in that growth as well. And we need ideas to do that. How you do that is you think about what can you eliminate that your competitors are doing, what can you reduce on what your competitors are doing, what can you create and introduce that's new. So what is an idea? My definition of an idea is what happens when two thoughts connect for the very first time. All those ideas are actually coming from your head, and what you put into your head affects the quality of what you'll come out with. So you can actually really get a lot more creative by doing things like today, by putting really good stuff into your head, by exposing yourself to what, not exposing yourself, I didn't mean it quite that way, yeah, but by getting exposed to what other people are doing, by networking, by talking, by listening, by coming to seminars. All of those things really, really help. So what you consume, what you choose to experience, what you choose to read, and if you do the same thing over and over and over again, you know, you'll get the same old thinking. So if you want new ideas and if you want to be able to form new connections, then it's really important to think about what you are actually consuming. But the thing about the brain, it takes the path of least resistance. It's a really big and interesting and powerful and important part of us. And for evolutionary reasons, what it will do is it will try and do things that take the least energy and that have what we think is the least amount of risk to protect us. So if we think the way that we've always thought, what happens is we just actually use the same old neural networks, the same old neural pathways over and over again. And we get into a habit of a way of thinking, and that feels really nice and comfortable, and it feels really nice and safe. And sometimes the most direct route to get to Morrison's across, when you've parked your car, is across the grass, and that's okay. But actually sometimes we also need to go around and think, what else is there? Are there any other alternatives? And if you want to be different, it's about learning how to use your brain and how to teach your brain to be really agile and think about things in a different way, in a way that your competition hasn't thought about before. And how you can do that is by disrupting your thinking, by doing something disruptive, by doing something you wouldn't normally do. Things I do, for instance, I do left-handed mirror writing. I jest not. There are some YouTube videos if you look hard enough, yeah? Because the mirror writing means that I am actually agitating and growing my brain and thinking in different ways. One nice and probably more day-to-day disruptor you could do is just simply ask yourself, what if? What if we did this? What if the customer did that? What if the competition did those things? And put in place some scenarios that you can actually work through and start to think differently. What if I were to ask you the one question you didn't want me to ask? What would that be? Asking yourself different questions to really explore thinking and look at things in a different way. Because the really good news is that our brains are plastic. But actually, the brain will die if we don't use it. Parts of the brain will die away, they'll fade away. And if we decide to use parts of our brain, we know that we can develop them and strengthen them. So, for instance, ways of doing things. This one's from the 1950s. It's a classic. It's an oldie but a goodie. What else can you do with a paperclip? By thinking about this sort of thing, what else can we do with it? What else can we do in the business? You actually improve your creative agility. Every time I lecture, I've got probably about 80 people in the room, and I'll say to them, 3 minutes, we'll pick an object at random, what else can you do with it? And they start off and they can do about 15 things on average. And over a 9-week period, they can do 50 to 60 things, alternative uses, yeah? They get better and better and better at it. And if we were to wire them up to a scanner and see what's going on in their head and see how their brains have developed, we would see new areas of the brain in use, and we would see them making new creative connections. So another tip is, if you want to be the best, then don't look at the best in your industry for inspiration, because you will only ever, at best, be as good as them. So if you want to be the best, you've got to look at who is really excelling out of sector. Get inspiration from other places. Now, some of you might know this, but what do EasyJet and Formula One have in common? EasyJet make their money by keeping those planes up in the air, because when the planes are up in the air, they've got bottoms on seats and they're earning revenue. And when those planes are parked, no revenue is being earned, and it's also very expensive to park your plane. And it's even more expensive to park your plane at an airport in a hangar than it is to park in Leeds city centre. They've worked with the Formula One pit stop process. They looked at that for their inspiration in terms of engineering turnaround. And then they took what they could and they implemented that. And it's not just them, Virgin Trains have done this. National Health, in terms of moving patients from intensive care units, from wards into operating theatres, have done the same. You can find inspiration from the most unlikely sources, and actually if you're doing things like thinking about your paper clips and doing some left-handed mirror writing and coming to events, it means that you will naturally be more able to find those connections. They'll come easily to you. The next tip is to seek out customer pain points and then fix them. So look at what's really bothering people. What are bothering your customers? It could be a small pain point. It might be, I want to go out and look good tonight. What am I going to wear? That's a pain point. It could be something really significant. Here's an example for you. Has anybody heard of Gary Clegg? Gary Clegg is a multimillionaire. When he's about 17, he invented the world best-selling product, the Slanket. It's a blanket with sleeves. And his pain point, bless him, was when he was watching his telly in bed and he wanted to change the channel, he had to take his arm out of from under the blanket to change channel. So what he did was he asked his mum to make him a blanket with sleeves. She did. He thought there's something in this. He got to make a few more. Now Slankets are still selling all over the world. This 17-year-old became a multimillionaire, and actually what he's doing is he's going around the world and investing his profits into doing really good stuff for developing countries, you know. And so a pain point, it can be really, really simple. If you've got loads of ideas and you're wanting to get these ideas off the ground and time's of the essence, focus on your MVP. MVP is your minimum viable product. Only make it as good as it needs to be. Because sometimes we want to perfect things, but actually, and we take so long doing that. And the thing is about that when you've perfected it, you might think it's perfect, but unfortunately customers don't, and you spent all that time and money and development producing something that isn't quite right. So it's more agile to do just enough and test it. If you do any more, that's a waste. If you do any less, you're failing to deliver. Sometimes your MVP means you're going to make such a cracking impression that you're going to be exceptional. So that's your MVP, be exceptional. Sometimes it's something quick and easy and straightforward. Test it. And I think my final tip is any positive disruption is a creative act that requires courage. So if you're going to do something different, you need to be brave sometimes. You know, it's brave to stand out from the crowd. It's brave to do something that your competitors aren't doing. You know, it's brave to do things that make you look different. But if you're going to be really, truly creative, then that takes courage. And that's something that I can help you with our Idea Time programme. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for staying with me.